Welcome back. Last time we looked at The Guyver, which was quite the effects-laden romp of action, monsters, Mark Hamill turning into a giant cockroach, and Jeffrey Combs having a cheeky wink at Reanimator. I enjoyed it, but I felt the misplaced slapstick comedy and main character lacking in any kind of charisma were the biggest problems with it. So, for the sequel, they pretty much fixed that, with a much more serious tone and starring none other than David Hayter. Yes,
Colonel,
that
I'm dummy thick.
David Hayter. So this should be pretty interesting. We begin with a brief narration explaining the previous film's events, being pretty light on details. It summarises Shawn becoming the Guyver and destroying Kronos, and how the Guyver is still telling Shawn to fight, but he's unsure of his purpose now. Also, the sequel takes place a year after the previous film. We will get more information on Mitsuki later, however, Mark Hamill's Max Reed will sadly go without mention. Which adds the idea that, although this is a sequel, it feels more like a soft reboot using the first film to get the origin story out of the way, and then just going off with its own story and universe. Which I'm okay with. As there are no more Zoanoids, at least according to Shawn, he's now doing his Batman thing, looking broody on rooftops, looking for criminals to stop, and fortunately, he finds some, as some kind of drug cartel is offloading their product. They've already killed one person and have a security guard hostage. Their haul is a load of toy dolls, but they're not what they seem.
The latest technology. You mix cocaine with plastic, you can shape it into anything you like.
And rather surprisingly, that's not as ridiculous as it may seem. Mixing cocaine with plastic is something that happens quite frequently. I've not seen any mention of making toy dolls out of it, which just takes the idea to its most ludicrous conclusion. But there are groups making cocaine plastic pellets that are undetectable to conventional methods of detection. Well, anyway, the gang starts to transport the dolls. However, noises are making them nervous. One of the members is soon thrown from a balcony, and they get ready for a fight, making sure to shoot a few steam pipes to give our Guyver the coolest intro he can get, emerging from the steam. The Guyver design has changed somewhat since the last film. It's mainly in the colour palette and texture, because before, it was a much more insectoid-looking carapace, but for this film, they've gone for a closer interpretation of the anime design, with a single light blue colour. However, if you want to load your headcanons a little bit, you could make the case that the Guyver in the first film was still new and growing and hadn't fully solidified its armour plating yet, which is what we see here. Yeah, I know it's a bit of a stretch, but I'm still leaning on the this is a soft reboot angle. More shooting ensues, leading to Shawn deflecting the bullets back at the bad guys, and when he starts fighting, you can tell right off the bat this production had a much more martial arts movie background, because the choreography is so much better. Punches look like they actually land, and there are some decent falls. However, Shawn hasn't really mastered the whole saving people yet, as the security guard is shot by the leader, so Shawn is quite pissed, to say the least. So, just after shooting someone, the bad guy has the balls to beg to be arrested. And as if this film is saying, this ain't a campy comedy this time, Shawn does this. It does feel like this opening is a response to the criticism of the first film. More violence, no comedy, darker tone. And although it is a bit weird seeing the Guyver just fighting random crime, it's still a really great opening that gets you right into the action. And before leaving, Shawn makes sure and leaves a calling card. Not too sure why though. You'd think he'd want to keep as much of a low profile as possible, considering he's a well-known vigilante to the cops. Back at home, Shawn is woken up by lightning and the Guyver calls to him, causing the nodules on his neck to pulsate. And we get a flashback of the Guyver attaching to Shawn. Nothing like it was in the first film, of course. According to David Hayter, this was the most taxing part of the film to make, likening it to torture. And I can see why. Shawn then wakes up again, seemingly from a dream fake-out. I love how they redid that. First, to show just how much of a traumatic experience it was, but also it makes it easier for us to accept this new guy as the Guyver. And weirdly, that scene was omitted from the UK release. Perhaps because it was too horrific? I'm not sure. There are a few scenes actually which were cut, and I'll mention them as they appear. The next day, Shawn sits down to do some doodling while watching TV. The doodles all seem to be important, crude versions of things like the Guyver, for example. And when some kind of news program comes on the TV, Shawn is quick to record it just in case something of relevance shows up. And coincidentally, he might have found something, as it talks about someone being killed by a werewolf, including an eyewitness. Which is possibly a reference to the first film where Balkus says that zoonoids have been mistaken for werewolves and vampires in the past. Also, something different to the anime version of Chronos. There, they are very good at removing any kind of witnesses, even going so far as to blow up a building at one point. So yeah, in the anime, that witness would definitely be dead. The story piques Shawn's interest even more so when the show mentions an archaeological dig near the incident, showing cave paintings of Shawn's exact drawings. So he wastes no time in hitching his way to the dig. However, before that happens, we get another scene cut from the UK release, and it's Mitsuki breaking up with Shawn. She's not happy with Shawn killing people, understandable, and not letting things go. I can get behind the first one, but the second one? I imagine it's pretty difficult for Shawn to let things go. She is basically saying, hey, I know you've got this living cyber armor creature inside your body making you kill, just try to ignore it. It's not exactly understandable. I mean, she did go through the same stuff that Shawn did, minus the armor. But hey, at least this means he can get a new love interest now. After hitchhiking to the dig as much as possible on his own, Shawn stops at a store to get some more information. The guy makes him buy something first, but gives nothing anyway. Kind of a dick move, really. However, fortunately, a woman's also in the stall, curious as to why he's interested. And in a rather refreshing display of honesty, Shawn shows her the pictures he's been drawing, explaining his compulsion, so she reluctantly gives him a ride to the dig. I do like that there's not so much of the cloak and dagger stuff, where Shawn has to come up with some convoluted excuse. He's just straight to the point. The woman, Corey, explains she's one of the dig's researchers, and although I said there's no cloak and dagger, Shawn doesn't reveal everything, keeping all the other info to himself. They arrive at the dig site and Corey gets Shawn inside pretending he's part of the team. Shawn notes the large amount of security and then when left alone feels compelled to go for a wander around the caves, finding some painting versions of his doodles, feeling some kind of connection. We then meet Dr. Marcus and Crane. Marcus is the scientist, Crane is the corporate suit. Without the suit, of course. There's some issues about the dig taking too long, but for now at least, they're friendly to each other. Marcus is also Corey's father. Shawn is set to work and he sees another connection to the first film, a fossilized zoonoid skull, and Shawn instantly recognizes it.
Lisker.
That connection to the first film is probably the most overt of the references, but if you didn't care for the first film, you can easily ignore it. It is strange though, considering that Lisker's storyline from the anime will be playing out in this film. That night, Shawn is relaxing after a hard day's work and Corey wants to know more about him, but Shawn remains tight-lipped. That's not good enough for Corey, threatening to get rid of him. However, at the same time, the guy from the news program is back, looking to kill himself a werewolf, even bringing a photographer along with him. And it doesn't take long for that werewolf to take notice. Shawn and Corey talk more and a scream is heard. Shawn springs into action, telling Corey to get help and he'll take care of what they think is a bear.
He'll take care of the bear? Oh, shit!
See? Now that was a comedic moment that worked. It wasn't dumb and it wasn't out of place. Mainly because the film didn't metaphorically turn and mug to the audience, hoping for them to laugh. The hunter and the photographer are attacked by the zoonoid and Shawn transforms as he runs, just as the photographer comes to a sticky end. In fairness, Shawn couldn't have saved that guy. Also, this zoonoid is even closer to resembling the Gregol zoonoid from the anime. Even closer than Lisker was. It's almost like the film showed his skull to say, the old zoonoids are dead, this is the new and improved versions, drawing a neat line between the two films. The Guyver soon enters the fight, surprised to find a zoonoid. Shawn tries to discover what he can from it, but a fight ensues. And it is such a breath of fresh air to have a fight scene like the anime. It's well shot and choreographed. I know I've said that before, but it can't be stated enough. The zoonoid attacks with a tree, but Shawn manages to avoid it and slash its face. The fight is then cut short when cars show up, causing the Zoonoid to run and Shawn to deactivate the Guyver, causing the hunter to pass out. Shawn directs helpers to the hunter, who is very scared of him. The others pass it off as shock though. But one guy is very suspicious of Shawn, wondering what he was going to do to a so-called bear. He then spots a piece of flesh sliced off by Shawn, secretly stuffing it in his coat, which Shawn notices.
Hey.
Ugh, it even made a squishing noise as he did it. At least put it in a tissue, a bag, something. Back at the camp, Shawn searches for the hidden Zoonoid, wondering which of the workers it might be, and the guy who was suspicious of Shawn isn't subtle as he slinks away from the camp. And Shawn overhears his conversation with someone, but clearly he isn't ready for that tactical espionage action just yet, as the guy is alerted to his presence. Shawn is confronted with the guy becoming aggressive, showing that he clearly knows about Zoonoids.
I know you got claws you ain't showing. I'm not the one with the claws.
Shawn realises that the guy is government, undercover, as he pulls a gun. Fortunately for him, Crane spots them, and that's the confrontation over for now. Now, everyone seems to be working to an agenda, as we see another shadowy figure telling someone else about the Guyver via very early Skype. It's all very vague, but it's clear those two guys are Kronos. And although it's never stated, the guy on screen is supposed to be Richard Gio. He's got the white hair and the suit. He may not be credited as Gio, but it's definitely him. Also, I wanted to talk about the shadowy figure.
The Guyver, he's here. He must be someone in the camp.
He's trying to mask his voice so we don't know who he is, and I might be in the minority here, but it's obviously Crane. Also, the whole who's a Zoonoid thing won't matter much longer anyway. That night, while Shawn has a rather sweaty night's sleep, something starts to happen at the dig, as the Guyver inside his neck pulsates and causes a crack in the cave wall to open up, waking Shawn in the process. The next morning, people are already working on the newly opened crack in the wall. There's then another deleted scene of Corey talking with a friend about her having a thing for Shawn, which actually makes sense that it got deleted because it's really pointless. There is more point though after that, as Shawn shows up and asks about the skeletons being dug, with Corey saying they're dinosaurs. And she actually says the exact word-for-word explanation that Shawn got earlier. And my initial reaction was that's why it got deleted, because it's just repetition. However, that's not the case at all. As Shawn calls her out for this boilerplate response, wanting to know what's really going on, Corey explains that they know this dig is a lot weirder than just dinosaurs. Which is a revelation to me, because if you watch the UK version, it's implied that all the workers who aren't Kronos are completely unaware of what they're actually doing. This scene changes that entirely. It's such a strange experience for me to come back to an old childhood favourite and finding it's really a different film. People working on the cave wall have managed to reach something other than rock. One of them describes it as feeling like leather. However, when hitting it with a trowel...
That don't sound like leather to me.
And I love this moment when they show it to Dr. Marcus.
What have you got, my dear?
Listen.
Whenever I see that, I'm always half expecting him to say, yeah, it's rock, get back to work. Because she doesn't explain beforehand that it feels like leather. If the thing they found looked drastically different to the surrounding cave, then it would have worked a bit better. The dig crew spring into high gear working to excavate the thing, and they have also scanned the entire mountain, finding it's a massive structure buried into the rock. Shawn sees the scans and concludes...
Metal Gear. It can't be.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
It's a ship.
Yes, they found a ship buried in the mountain, otherwise known as the Relic in the anime. And that evening, while everyone celebrates, Corey and Shawn talk about the structure, which Corey has been analysing. It's mostly just a scene to reinforce the love interest thing going on between them, so obviously it's another deleted scene. Back at the camp, Shawn sees some of the workers joking around, and that's when he sees a scar on one of their faces, confirming he was the Zoonoid Shawn fought earlier. Although, even if you look at the guy's face in freeze frame, it's still not very clear what part is supposed to be the giveaway scar. Fortunately, the film makes it clear what we're supposed to be seeing, so it's not much of a big deal, but I'm always struggling to see what Shawn sees. And that's when the Fed pulls Shawn to the side and straight up asks him about the Kronos Corporation. Shawn is as evasive as ever, but the guy is onto him.
I don't know anything.
You knew enough to know the claws weren't yours.
And despite Shawn thinking he destroyed Kronos, turns out that was just the LA branch. Which is a pretty big oversight, to be honest. Shawn might have checked if they did business elsewhere, cause a massive corporation like Kronos is not just going to stick to one city. Then Shawn would have had something to do outside of killing drug dealers. After this revelation, Shawn seems to trust the guy a bit more and tells him all about the Zoonoids. He conveniently neglects to mention the Guyver though. Back at the site, the workers are determined to crack the ship open, even trying a blowtorch, but nothing's touching it. However, Shawn seems to be feeling something, while Marcus and Crane argue about how to get in.
What do you want me to say? Open sesame?
What's kind of funny is that now all those workers think open sesame is what gets them inside. But can I just point out that if Shawn hadn't gone to the dig, they wouldn't have even found the ship, let alone know how to open it? But you could argue it's best they open it now with the Guyver there to stop them, rather than potentially years from now without Shawn being there. Marcus has searched the inside of the ship, finding it safe to explore, and Corey lets Shawn tag along inside. Corey documents the interior and Shawn wanders off on his own. He finds some sort of communication room as he pleads with the ship to tell him what to do.
I want my life back!
Still 4 years into the future and Solid Snake's voice was already there. Of course, Corey can't help herself in touching things and by sheer coincidence manages to find a Guyver unit. However, this Guyver unit is quite considerably damaged with a large crack through the control medal, which, as in the anime, would make this Guyver Unit 2. However, there, the unit was damaged when the Zoonoid who stole it blew himself up. It's never really explained why the film version got damaged, but I like the fact that it's very obviously damaged. Because I never did like how in the anime the unit just has a small dint on the medal. I guess it shows how temperamental the control medal is, but there's no doubt about the film version. Corey shows her father the unit, and Crane is quick to take it for himself, asserting his power. Securing the unit, he's also told about Shawn being the Guyver. Meanwhile, Shawn tells Corey about what's really going on and who Kronos is and what they can do, while the Fed listens in. Corey goes to confront Crane and she overhears Gyo telling Crane to eliminate all non-Kronos personnel, getting herself captured at the same time. Shawn is looking for her, however, the ship calls to him even harder now, and he can't resist returning. Crane then shows up to offer a parley, being surprisingly candid, saying they're both born of the aliens in the ship, and they're alike, asking Shawn to trust him. He then transforms, which actually still looks really good. His Zoonoid form is quite distinctive as well. The animatronics are incredible, being able to get a very expressive face. Shawn seems somewhat convinced by Crane, but he does come to his senses and refuses, so he's subsequently knocked out and captured.
Snake, are you okay? Snake? Snake!
I'm sorry, I promise that's the last one. Corey is being taken somewhere, and she even kicks one of her captors in the face in an attempt to escape, but turns out that's not necessary as the truck is stopped by a rogue Zoonoid. And for some reason, he looks like a man centipede, but sounds like an elephant. The first film had the same elephant sound effects, but that was because one of the Zoonoids had elephant-like features. Here, it's just really odd. I figured they're going for a generic sounding like an animal effect, rather than a specific elephant sound effect, but there's just no getting away from it. Corey runs while the centipede man attacks the truck, tipping it over onto its roof, causing the occupants to also transform for a big Zoonoid fight as they burst out of the truck. They also call the centipede man Marcus, revealing Corey's father to be a Zoonoid. Which has some strange implications the film doesn't explore, because I believe I'm right in thinking that the Zoonoid's ability to transform can be passed down from parent to child. So does that make Corey a Zoonoid? She just hasn't tapped into the ability to transform yet? It's interesting to think about. The Zoonoids fight, and despite it being 3 guys in rubber suits, it's still really well done. Also, there's an extended sequence of the truck falling down the cliff and exploding. It's completely inconsequential, since no one's in danger, so it just seems kind of random. However, and this is just my theory, because Marcus then falls down a cliff with the Zoonoids taking chase to continue fighting. So the truck had to establish that there was a cliff there to make the location change less jarring. That's something the Power Rangers did quite a lot too, where suddenly they'd be fighting in a quarry for no reason. I mean, look at this shot. That is for sure a Power Ranger style shot right there. It's soon clear that Marcus is no match for the other two Zoonoids, so Corey starts throwing rocks to get their attention, with the insect one chasing after her. And back with Shawn, he's tied up and drugged. But I guess the drugs aren't that effective, as the Fed comes to his rescue, and he's up and about pretty quickly. The Fed wants to know about the Guyver, but Shawn just punches him out and runs off to save Corey. Shawn reaches a large cliff and shouts to Corey, which might seem a bit pointless, but as soon as he hears her, he gets her location. And then we see the most well-known and most badass transformation of the film, as Shawn jumps from the cliff.
Guyver!
It's pretty damn badass and surpasses anything in the first film. However, I am compelled to point out that unfortunately, when we see these scorch marks on the ground, you can also see the actual footprints of where the guy was really standing. Fortunately, it doesn't actually detract from the scene. Corey is still being chased by the insect Zoonoid while Marcus continues to fight, but fortunately, Shawn is on his way. You know, he'd get there a lot faster if he wasn't in slow motion. Just saying. Never mind, he's here already, quickly getting Corey out of harm's way, and he toys with the Zoonoids a bit, ducking in and out of the water, before taking one of them out in quick succession. It's then Guyver vs Gregol. At first it seems like he's got Shawn beat, but not for long, with some fancy footwork, and then crushing the Zoonoid against the tree with some added blood to really make it look like the anime. Shawn then slashes him up a bit, bends his hands back, similar to the first fight in the anime. He then lasers his eyes out and crushes his face, just like the opening titles of the anime. The film's just showing off now with its little nods, and I welcome them completely. While Shawn recuperates, Marcus appears behind Corey and Shawn immediately senses him and pounces. Corey tries to stop him from killing her father, and there's a tense moment of blackout before we see he stopped inches from Corey's face. I guess he learned his lesson from that incident with Mitsuki. Shawn then deactivates the Guyver, freaking out Corey even more, considering she just found out about her monster dad. Back at the ship, Crane is informed of Shawn's escape, and in the cave, he's basically gonna have all the workers shot, which is certainly like the Kronos I know. Fortunately, the Fed is back with some backup and manages to take control of the situation. At the river, Corey was initially freaked out, but she understands why Shawn was so secretive. They manage to reconcile effectively, and then end up having a kiss. I'm starting to think that whoever edited the UK version really didn't like the idea of these two getting together, because all these scenes are cut out. All the workers are being quickly evacuated from the camp, and the Feds have set up a perimeter, while Crane and the others are arrested. However, there's a problem, as one Zoonoid is unaccounted for, and he starts taking out the soldiers. Corey and Shawn arrive, and Shawn wants to destroy the ship. Corey is naturally against it, but they both agree it's the right thing to do. Outside, the backup has been killed by a Zoonoid looking pretty much like Liska did, and Crane takes back control. With the reuse of the Liska Zoonoid, it continues to reinforce this whole batch-created idea. But also, I do wonder why they chose to reuse that particular Zoonoid, considering he was such a big part of the first film. And they made a big deal about finding that skull. So I can imagine a few people potentially getting confused by that. Crane talks with Gio, and he's given an hour to bring in the Guyver, and that's when he looks at the Guyver unit with it lighting up. At the same time, in the cave, Shawn and Corey have set the place to blow with dynamite, but it's then the ship calls Shawn again, and she tells him to go inside. Shawn reaches the communications room and realizes it's not him the ship wants to talk to, it's the Guyver, so he transforms, and that's when the ship starts the info dump. And I like how there's no narration, we just see images, so it's up for a bit of interpretation. We see the dawn of the Earth and creation of the first Zoonoids as Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal man. I forget the difference. and how they would transform as part of a primitive ritual, with a nice cameo from the Mark Hamill cockroach and the same transformation of Liska again. I guess they had to make their money back somehow. We also see the creation of the first Guyver. And I absolutely love the fact that they bothered to make a completely different Guyver suit just for that small sequence, because they could have gotten away with just using the main one, but I appreciate the extra effort there. Also in the vision, something we don't know went wrong, and the aliens had to leave Earth. And while that goes on, Crane and the others show up, forcing Shawn to leave, and Corey is captured yet again. Crane gets 2 Zoanoid goons to look for Shawn in the ship, and they're immediately thrown out again. So Crane wants Shawn to deactivate the Guyver, threatening to kill Corey. It's then a battered Marcus returns to get kicked around some more as Crane transforms. Pretty much everything's setting up for a fight. Marcus transforms as well and punches start flying, with Shawn against the 2 goons, the Fed versus the female Zoanoid, and Marcus v Crane. And it'll be a little tedious for me to describe how this goes punch for punch, so after a lot of chasing and fighting, the Fed takes out the female Zoanoid by pushing her into an electrical box.
Bitch.
And he was cold with it too. That was surprising. Not sure why his gun made a suppressed noise without a suppressor though. Shawn eventually managed to take out one of the Zoanoids, Jaws style, with a stick of dynamite in its mouth, and Marcus is mortally wounded by Crane with a pipe to the gut. Shawn's other Zoanoid has its neck snapped, which I'm not sure is a reference to the anime, but let's just say it is. Corey tries to protect her father and Shawn takes on Crane. However, there's a problem, as the Fed returns with the case, but... And this is where Crane becomes Liska in choosing to use the damaged Guyver 2 unit. However, in the anime, Guyver 2 looks pretty similar to Guyver 1. But here...
Biomark!
Crane is an actual Guyver Zoanoid, which is something I don't think I've ever seen in the anime, though I could be wrong there. But I've got to give the film kudos on this one. Also, I keep making reference to Power Rangers. Well, it turns out that the guy in the Guyver Zoanoid suit, as well as having a lucrative stuntman career, the actor Tetsuro Koike played a Tenga warrior and putty patroller for 90 episodes of Mighty Morphin, and was second unit director for Dino Thunder. So it turns out there was even more of a connection to the Power Rangers than I first thought. Anyway, back to the film. It's clear that the Guyver 2 unit is quite unstable, causing Crane to twitch. And then comes the big final boss fight, with Crane being more than a match for Shawn, countering his moves effectively. He also decides to do this, which I have to put down to the defective unit, because what the hell was the point of that? He even tried to grab Shawn. He didn't even attempt to kick, so why bother? He just wanted to run on his hands, apparently. There's a lull in the fight, and Shawn tells Crane what he found out in the ship, that the Zoanoids were a failed alien experiment, and the Guyver was created to clean up the mistake. But it doesn't really do much to stop the punching. By the way, I know that's the incorrect history. He's doing a thing. It's fine. After Shawn busts out a Street Fighter move, they turn to blades. Did anyone else see the similarities between that scene and X-Men Origins Wolverine? That was weird. So they have a sword fight, and despite one of them having swords coming from their elbows, the fight choreography is really not goofy at all. It really does work. Crane manages to stab Shawn with more anime-like blood spraying from the Guyver's exhaust vents, and much like in the anime, Shawn is pretty outmatched by the new Guyver. However, he has one weakness. In the anime, which I'm sure is a phrase you're all sick of now, in order to beat Liska, Sho just punches him hard enough for the control metal to fall out of his head, which I never did like how flimsy that made it seem. I much prefer the film version. Shawn uses the distraction to then remove the control metal from Crane's head, effectively killing him. And unlike the first film, this control metal-based death is neither quick nor painless, as Crane slowly melts while screaming. And it goes on for quite a while, exposing his skull underneath, until Shawn drops the defunct metal and breaks out the Mega Smasher cannon once again, vaporizing Crane. I hope he destroyed the medal with that blast, otherwise couldn't he just come back? Also, slight issue with the use of the Mega Smasher cannon. In the first film, Shawn doesn't use it simply because he doesn't know it's there, and he's still getting used to the Guyver. However, here, that's no longer the case, so why doesn't Shawn use it more often? You could argue that it uses a lot of energy, and it's also incredibly destructive, but still, a few more times at least, because it's used a lot more in the anime. Perhaps it's the budget. Corey gives Shawn a hug, however, it turns out what Shawn told Crane was a lie. The Zoanoids weren't the failed experiment, the Guyvers were, so to him, he has no destiny. One thing to point out, Shawn's story is not exactly like the anime, because there, the Guyver was first created as an all-purpose protective suit for the aliens themselves to wear, so the Guyver itself is not actually a failed experiment. It was only when they used it on a newly created human, because the Guyver allowed it to break free of the alien psionic control, and it went mental. That's where it gets its name from, because Guyver in the alien language means out of control. Corey helps Shawn, saying he made his own destiny instead, and he then uses the Guyver to send the ship back where it came from. And he might have gotten the others to safety before doing that, as they need to make a quick exit before the mountain explodes. And the film ends with Shawn and Corey driving off into the sunset. I think we can all agree that this film is a vast improvement over the first film in almost every single way. It made so much of a difference to have someone who's experienced with martial arts films on the production, because just from the fight choreography alone, this is the better film. And the effects are still just as good. They may not be as intricate, but they do the job well. And I think the addition of more story elements, mainly the Liska stuff, helped bridge the gap between this film and the anime. Also, I can't finish without talking about David Hayter. Yes, he may not be the guy in the suit, but this is so his character. One thing that's key is he managed to be a reluctant hero without becoming a brooding cliché, which is not easy to do. In this age of the superhero movie, I do think something a bit different, something more violent and strange like the Guyver, would be more than welcome today. And hey, David Hayter continues to say he'd be up for returning, so I think someone needs to get on that movie as soon as possible. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching, and I want to give a big thank you to everyone who continues to donate to the Patreon page. Their names are on the screen right now. Your support really helps. And if anyone else would like to donate to help keep the channel running and also get access to the Deusdaecon Reviews Discord, the link is on screen right now and in the description below. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.